I can't wait for Saturday. I can't wait for Leinster, Toulouse, Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, Champions Cup final this weekend. One of the biggest games of the season and potentially one of the best games we'll see all year as well. If the last couple of finals are anything to go by, we are in for a treat. And as I say, I'm really looking forward to being there, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to do a little midweek preview, I suppose. I guess the teams will start to be out towards the end of this week, but I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do a video, so I wanted to jump on now and start to look ahead to the game, just some of my thoughts on that final, looking ahead to the final, some of the question marks there, I suppose about the game generally, and in particular, from a Leinster perspective, are there scars from the last couple of finals? But any thoughts you have, you can put it in the comments section. Anything that I touch upon or just anything else you want to throw in there, make sure you do that. Because it is a fascinating final, this one. I was trying to explain it to someone earlier who's not a big rugby fan. And it's kind of like the Real Madrid and Bayern Munich. If it was a Champions League final, it is the best of the best. It is the best of the best. It is two of the most historic teams, two of the most successful teams, and two sides that when this competition started way back when last year, you would not have been shocked if they were the ones to get to the final. You expected them to be there at the business end. So we've got the final that many people from a neutral perspective would have wanted to see. But I think it's so difficult to call. And it's so difficult to understand, I think, where it's going to be won and lost, which is where I'll be really interested in your views, because there's so many different ways of looking at it. For example, at first I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, is this going to be about Leinster's improved defence coming up against the slick attacking game of Toulouse, which it could well be. Those are two elements that characterise those two teams. But on the flip side of that, it's not like Toulouse are just a team that chuck it wide and throw some offloads and are able to attack. They have an absolute hefty pack of forwards. They can try and go through the middle of you. Their forwards will do a lot of work to get them over the gain line. And likewise, the flip side of that, Leinster this season, whilst I don't think they're necessarily the slick attacking force they were last year, they have improved that defence, they can still attack. They still have different ways to hurt you. These are two teams of such quality that I think it's very difficult to reduce this just to a discussion of Leinster's defence against Toulouse's attack, for example. But that means, for me, I just find it so difficult to call. And I think it is fascinating to see what different elements these two teams possess come to the fore and get them on top, if that makes sense. Now, one of those areas could be the breakdown, because I was watching back last year's final, and it was Jaco Peyper, the referee, the South African, so I think naturally you get a kind of different interpretation with that. It's an English referee this year, this time around, and I think an area of Leinster's game, from what I've seen of them in the Champions Cup this year, has been to go at the breakdown, to go really hard at it, and naturally that means pushing the boundaries to see what you can get away with. Now, last year, the breakdown was a mess with Jaco Peyper. That's what happens. I'm not sure that will necessarily be the case this year. So how much are Leinster able to get on top in that area? What sort of impact is that going to have? Can that halt, therefore, the Toulouse attack and what Toulouse are going to try and bring to the game? That's one area that I think is going to be absolutely vital, because I think last year it was, and also the year before. But that is just one of a number of different areas we could talk about, because we could talk about the different matchups, whether it's Jamison Gibson-Park and Antoine Dupont, whether it's at fullback, whether it's in the second row, or that back row. The back rows we're going to have this weekend are both going to be absolutely unbelievable. So I don't know, you tell me, what are the areas of the game that you think are going to decide it, outside of the obvious stuff that decides every sort of rugby match? What's the individual detail in these two teams that's going to be absolutely pivotal on the weekend? As I say, I think the breakdown, I think what we see from the breakdown, but there are so many other areas that we could go into. And I suppose the one big thing that we have to mention, Leinster fans will get sick of hearing this. Leinster players, I'm sure, will get sick of hearing this. But we will continue to ask these questions probably until they win another Champions Cup. And that is the psychology. And it's to what extent are there psychological scars over, in particular, the last couple of years, where they haven't been able to get over the line in the biggest games when it matters most. Last year in Dublin, where you feel like everything is in position for them to get another star on their jersey. Unbelievable start to that game, by the way, watching it back. They came out incredibly well, but La Rochelle held in there and eventually ended up winning it late on. The way in which La Rochelle won it the year before that, right at the death. There are psychological question marks now over this Leinster team. And on the one hand, it's packed full of Ireland players who've been incredibly successful, winning Six Nations and Test Series in New Zealand. But they have come up short in the biggest games over the last few years. And to what extent does that have an impact? And I suppose you could argue we saw it in the semi-final. I don't think I'd necessarily go that far. They could have been out of sight against Northampton in the first half. Ross Byrne missed some kicks, which meant that Northampton was still within a score late on. But you could start to sense the nerves, I think. And if I was in that Toulouse dressing room or part of that Toulouse coaching staff, I would be saying, boys, hang in there. Keep it close till we get to the hour mark. If it's close going into the final 20 minutes, they will get nervous. They will feel that pressure. The psychological demons will start to rise up in the back of their minds. That will have an impact based upon what we've seen in this competition and, of course, the URC as well. And the fact that Leinster, despite always being the favourites to win that, not having won it over the last couple of years as well. What sort of pressure does that put onto this Leinster team? And I get it, as I said at the start of this point, the players will get sick of hearing about that because it's quite an easy narrative to trot out. I also think you can't avoid it based upon what we've seen. I think we have to speak about that and whether that has an impact. But as I say, I think it's going to be a brilliant occasion, sell out at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. I will be going, those of you that are. Let me know if you're heading to the game. I think it's going to be a great occasion. The FA Cup final is also on the other side of town, but it's London, getting towards the summer. Great sporting events, what you love to see. And as I say, I find it so difficult to call. The team selection will be fascinating. I know Leinster have had people return from injury from what I've seen. Hugo Keenan possibly coming back in. James Ryan, I think, is okay. A few other players. But I suppose what you can say for Leinster, is this going to be a different approach? Like we've spoken all season about the Nienaber effect and the defence, which I mentioned earlier. What does that look like in a final when the pressure is on? Is this a team that plays territory and keeps it tight? Or just how do they approach the game? And I think from Toulouse, we probably know what we're going to see, which I think is those big forwards doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Jack Willis got through loads of work in the quarterfinal and semi-final, trying to punch holes in the middle, which releases Dupont, Untermack, all of those others to exploit it out wide. Like the amount of times in that semi-final against the Exeter Chiefs that they were scoring tries out wide untouched because they'd done so much of the hard work, so much battering through the middle that they were then able to exploit it. I expect that's what we'll still see from Toulouse. I guess maybe my fascination is how Leinster approach this, and in particular that psychological element. So those are my thoughts at the moment. I will try and do something once the teams are out, but the reason I wanted to do this video is because I'm just not sure I'm going to have time. I will be there at Tottenham. I will be doing a video after the game, so keep your eye out on the channel for that one. And let me know what you think of it. And also, I haven't said this yet, but like the video and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I appreciate all the subscriptions we get. Let's keep growing, so hit subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you in the next one.